Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. As always, I'm super grateful and excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. And this week on the podcast, I am joined by Jackie Murphy. A decade before she was the host of the Yoga Boss podcast, Jackie learned the hard way that being a talented yoga teacher wasn't enough to build a lifelong, profitable business. Using her 10 years experience teaching, opening studios, and leading teacher trainings, Jackie now helps yoga teachers become profitable CEOs by offering them effective marketing, sales, and business foundation strategy. In this episode, we're diving into all of that and more. We're going to talk about studio ownership and what Jackie learned through her years as a yoga studio owner, as well as tips for how to develop an entrepreneurial mindset that will help you thrive in your yoga business. And I feel like something that's so interesting about the last couple of episodes is just how important it is to shift our mindset, to learn, to grow, to get clear on what we want with our business, and then really shift and step into that mindset. So we're going to talk about that, as well as Jackie's top business lessons that she's learned in her career and more. So this episode is jam-packed with goodness. I hope that you guys really enjoy it. And without further ado, here is Jackie. Welcome to the podcast today, Jackie. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm curious where you're joining me from.
I am down in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, cool. The company my husband works for had a headquarters in Charleston for like a tiny minute in their history. And so we were spending quite a bit of time there at one point. I haven't been for years because they ended up shutting down that office and just becoming completely remote, even pre-pandemic. But I love Charleston. Charleston's amazing.
We're a little bit spoiled. I mean, it's just living by the beach. It's the best.
Yeah, I feel like Charleston is like kind of a hidden gem, but like not a hidden gem. If that makes sense. It's like people know, and the people who do know, but then it's like other people are like, Charleston, South Carolina, like what's there?
Yep. That's spot on.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your like origin story with yoga, like how you got into yoga, what inspired you to become a teacher, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I've told this story so many times now that it's like just part of who I am, right? So I had a youth group leader growing up. I grew up Christian, and I had a youth group leader take me to my first yoga class. And it was like love at first sight. I mean, it was hard, but it was one of those things where like I knew the way that I felt after that class, it was something that I was going back to. And so that was when I was 15, 14. I mean, I'm so lucky to have found it at that time in my life and just kept practicing and then went to school. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and in school, I knew I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I knew it's what I was passionate about, but I was getting the narrative of like, you can't do that. That's not a viable career option. You need to get your degree in X, Y, and Z. And so I got certified to teach while I was in college, but just taught on the side. Until really after college, I was miserable. I was not happy at the job that I was at. And I was teaching at 6 a.m. in the morning and then like right after work again. And I was like, you know, what am I doing? I need to go all in. And yes, it's scary. And yes, it's not what society will expect you to do, but it's what I want to do. And I haven't looked back. And it's just always been my career.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious, were you always like passionate about the idea of opening a studio, or where did studios kind of come into play with your journey?
No. And I think this is something that I talk to people about, and you've probably heard too, but I think when I was in teacher training and then starting to teach, it was like the only viable option to make it a career in my head seemed like a studio. I think now maybe it is much more common to have something online, to offer a course, to combine it with coaching, to like make your own offer. But 10 years ago, that wasn't really happening yet. Maybe it was, and I just didn't know about it. That could definitely be the case. But what I saw was like, okay, if I want to be a yoga teacher, then I have to go the studio route because that's how I'll be able to do this for a living. And so that led me into studios, and I don't obviously regret anything. Like I've met all the best people in my life are from yoga and like from those studios. So it was all worth it. But would I have done that originally? I don't know. I don't know if that was the thing that needed to happen, but obviously it's the thing that did happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to think about like if you were entering the yoga industry like today, for example, like if you were doing your teacher training today, would your path be studios? It's like we'll never know, right? Like there's just we can't do that in the way that life works. But it's interesting to consider like, did you just do it because it's like, okay, I'm doing this full time. This is the way to do it. And I do feel like 10 years ago, there was a lot more of that. I know I started teaching 8 years ago, and I felt like that's what really inspired me to start my podcast was like, I was inquisitive about how can I do this in a way that's sustainable financially for myself, that's not opening a studio. And it seemed like people were doing it, but it's like you kind of had to find those people that weren't like what you were talking about, like hustling full-time job, working on either side, working weekends, or running a studio. So definitely interesting to consider that.
Yeah. And I remember seeing people who maybe didn't have a studio, but were doing it full time. And it's like you had to get in with them for them to like give you any sort of mentorship or like guidance. It wasn't like freely accessible to have the kind of information that you are producing. And I'm so glad it is now because so many, I mean, you need it. When you leave teacher training, you leave as a teacher, you don't know what to do with that skill. And it just used to be, I mean, I remember searching for a mentor. I remember like begging, like someone tell me, how do I do this? This is what I want to do. And like, there was just either the response of like, nope, can't do it. You should marry rich or like, just get a job. And I'm like, no, someone, you're doing it. Just tell me how to do it.
If you have a yoga studio, listen up. Running a yoga studio has never been more complicated. With all the new ways to interact with your current and potential clients, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. The last thing that you need is complicated studio software, slowing you down and zapping your free time. I know so many studio owners who feel frustrated because they're talking to customer support more than they're talking to their students. That's why I'm super, super excited about this latest update from Offering Tree. Offering Tree has added a lot of new features recently to meet the needs of studios. So check out what they have to offer or book a demo call at offeringtree.com/pricing. The right software can help you make more money and spend more time doing what you want to do with your business. And that's why I believe in Offering Tree and the difference their tools can make for yoga studio owners. Who doesn't want to spend more time with students and less time struggling to piece together software? Also, have I mentioned that you can do everything you need to do all in one place with just one payment? So on top of spending less time struggling, you can also spend a little bit less money. I promise I won't be offended if you pause the show for the next minute to head on over to offeringtree.com/pricing to book a demo call. And of course, we have a special discount for you for listening to the show, and that's offeringtree.com/MBOM. So make sure you check that out. All right, now back to the show. Yeah, definitely. I hear you on that for sure. And so I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit about like overview of what studio ownership life was like for you?
Yeah. So I worked with a franchise group. So I wasn't the sole owner of the studio. We opened studios in different locations, and it was a fascinating experience because we'd go into a new market and we'd open a studio, and every single market would be different and every single studio is different. And knowing what that studio needed in terms of marketing, in terms of getting students in the door, changed every single time we did it. What I would say is like studio ownership it is hard. It's like 90% business, maybe 10% teaching and leading a teacher training or developing teachers. But it is mostly, hey, we have to pay the bills and we have to run the electricity and make sure everything's working. And if emergencies happen, if people can't show up, like you are the go-to fallback person. And so I found that like when I first started doing it, I was working 60, 80 hours a week. I mean, I was just always there. It was my life. Now was at a time in my life where I had no kids. I didn't have a family yet. I had a dog. She came with me. Um, so I could devote all of that. But as I opened these different studios, eventually it got to the point where I was like, I have to figure out how to do this in less time because this is not sustainable for anybody. And I really got very intentional about figuring out how to run a studio in like 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, so that I actually had a life outside of it. And I think that's where most studio owners honestly give up. That's where they give up, is like when they're in the weeds and they're like, I'm burning the candle at both ends and I don't see a way to grow my impact or enjoy my life. And so this just must not be the thing. And there is a way to do it, but you do have to be very strategic and smart about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can we dive into that a little bit? Can we talk about like what kind of the way
to be
is
strategic?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's going to be different for every studio, right? Because every studio, every business has its own personality. So what worked for me because I did the work of figuring out like, what do I like to do? How do I like to do it? How do my people respond? So I say all that to say, like, the strategy is important, but you have to adapt the strategy based on your personality and the studio's personality. When it comes to running a studio, running a yoga business in general, I think knowing what actions are a needle moving action is so important. So doing the things that are actually going to produce revenue or income and prioritizing those things, and then putting everything else either on your calendar for later or just never doing it at all is very important. So what I would prioritize is meeting new people, is growing your network. And then I would prioritize selling to those people. And so many people avoid the selling altogether because it's not something that we like as yoga teachers just like want to do naturally, I don't think. But if you can do those two things every day and you can do them quickly in like an hour every day, then you have the time and space to do the other stuff that you want to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think it's like kind of like reshifting the focus. And then also, I love what you're talking about, like selling to your people. Like, and I think that one of the things that's challenging for a lot of yoga teachers and also studio owners is like just the business acumen. Like a lot of people, well, most people don't come from a business background or like have a business degree. And I think it's shifting a little bit now, like with yourself and me in the industry and stuff, where it's like, we're teaching these types of things and we're teaching them in trainings. But I know when I took my teacher training, it was like, I think we talked for like an hour about business and it was mostly about like insurance and yoga lines. And I was like, okay, awesome. And then I trained in Bali and I came back to Canada where I was living at the time and was like, wait, like, how do I get a job?
Yeah. What do I do with this insurance that I have?
Yeah. Like I bought the insurance and like, I'm ready to teach. Who can I teach? Like I knew nothing. I had no idea what I was doing, And I think that that's the piece that's missing for a lot of people. And it's like, you see the opportunity to run a studio, but it's like, if you don't have the business side of things, it's like, you don't maybe know that, hey, people don't just come, we have to do marketing. And then when they do come and they like try a class with us or they do an intro pass, it's like, we need to sell something to them. We have to have something for them.
Yes. I also did my training in Bali. So that's so cool that you were there. It was amazing. I would say too, like the most common mistake that I see is like, maybe to market. I mean, most yoga teachers know that they need to tell people about their classes or their studio they're offering. But when they market, they're marketing multiple different things. And then when it comes to selling, they're selling everything they can imagine. They're selling a 5-class pack and a 10-class pack and a 20 and a membership and a year long and like all of these different options. And that's not bad or wrong. And having the understanding of your student's journey, your customer's journey of where you ideally would want them to go, the purchase you'd ideally like them to make, and guiding them through that is what most yoga teachers miss and most studio owners miss. So if you are running a studio and you're seeing new students come in and they're doing your intro offer, what is your foundational offer? I've seen studios do it with a class pack. I've seen studios do it with a membership, but you have to know so that you can guide people towards that. And then if it's not the right offer for them, that's when you present all these other options. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to the Cheesecake Factory?
I've
This
been
is
to the
how I,
Cheesecake Factory.
this is how I talk about it. Like, I think yoga studios almost have like the menu that the Cheesecake Factory has with like, it's huge. It's like a
It's
book.
so overwhelming.
So overwhelming. You're like, what do I eat here? I don't know. And that's kind of what's happening for so many yoga students when they go into a yoga studio or into a yoga business. They're overwhelmed with the choices. Land on any teacher's website and their offerings include this course, this membership, this private corporate yoga retreats. And you're like, wait, where do I even start? That's what you want to clear up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. That's an amazing tip for people. Cause I think that if you're a studio, there's a good takeaway with that. And also if you're a teacher, cause I think the way the landscape has kind of shifted since the pandemic and kind of through the pandemic has been that so many yoga teachers are like building their own businesses out, which I think has been like a really huge silver lining of the pandemic has been that teachers have this like amazing opportunity to run online studios or these online businesses with all these different offerings that can support them without them needing the studios anymore. But I do feel like there can be a lot of like confusion that happens in there. And I think sometimes teachers put like so many things out there and then they get confused because people aren't buying them. And then it's frustrating, right? It's like, why aren't people coming to my classes? Why aren't people signing up for my courses? Why aren't people buying my memberships? And I feel like sometimes it is exactly like you're saying, like people don't know where they fit into your offerings. Like your ideal client is coming, maybe you're targeting them, but they don't know what to do with everything that's there.
Yeah, they want to buy something. They just don't know what to buy. So there was a new study done actually during the pandemic, which is cool because it's very up to date, that showed that 40 to 60% of sales are lost because of indecision, because of this like decision fatigue that our students and our customers go through. So knowing that, you just have to help them, guide them through that decision, just like you would guide them through a class or guide them through a meditation. That's all you're doing in your marketing and your selling too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. I love that. Yeah, that's great. And I'm curious, I kind of want to come back to your story a little bit so we can kind of like connect the pieces of the puzzle here. What like influenced you or encouraged you to kind of step away from studio ownership and shift gears into more like business coaching?
Yeah. So I mentioned I opened several studios. So the second studio I opened, we had a goal with opening with 200 members and we like barely hit that goal. We did it, but we struggled and we hustled. And honestly, I hated it. Just like wasn't fun. And then the third studio I opened, we opened with over 1,000 members and it was a blast. It was like I loved selling. So this was a big transformation for me. And the thing that changed between those two studios was getting a coach, was me working personally with a coach. And so I had the experience of, wow, like this could really help. It really helped me. It could really help a lot of people. And I think after I opened this third studio, it was almost like goal achieved. Check. I did it, what I was like wanting to do. And so now what? What do I want to do next? And I had a network around me of yoga teachers who were saying, I want to do this full time. I can only hire so many people at a studio. Definitely like not full time. There's one full-time person. And so like I really wanted to find a way to change the industry for the better, to give more yoga teachers the opportunity to have that career that they wanted and create the impact that they wanted. So I got certified as a coach and went right into first originally helping the teachers at the studio build their businesses. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this on a bigger scale. It's time for me to go. There was also a part of what I will teach my clients and what I would talk to studio owners about is you're always building your pipeline of who is going or could replace you if you were going to, I don't know, move up or go or like want to take a step back in your business. And there was just like this perfect team of people that didn't need me. And it was like this beautiful moment of like, now it's your turn, go for it. And I get to go do this new thing. And it's my turn for this new challenge. So it was time. It was just that knowing of like,
yeah, no, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious, have you continued teaching throughout all of this or did you step back from teaching also?
oh, I stepped back. So I haven't taught since 2019. So we were in New York, we were in Brooklyn for the pandemic. And so everything was shut down. And that's when I kind of stopped teaching the asana or group classes. And I miss it. I mean, we talked about it before hitting record, but like I have two babies under 3 right now. So it's not the time for me to be teaching, but gosh, every day I think about it.
Ready to supercharge your career and business success? Coach Pals is the ultimate networking platform tailored exclusively for wellness professionals like yourself. Coach Pals focuses on empowering connections that truly transform your path. Whether you're a dedicated yoga teacher or an ambitious yoga business owner, they've got you covered with innovative features designed just for you. Let's talk about Coach Pals professional profiles. They're not your typical resumes. They're dynamic showcases of your expertise, experience, and skills, enriched with your wellness passion, journey, and community impact. With testimonials and skill endorsements, your profile becomes a magnetic hub for partners and clients. Imagine having a central space that unites your professional identity, opening doors to limitless opportunities thanks to the power of effective networking. From dream job openings to fruitful partnerships and supportive communities, Coach Pals truly has it all. Use code MBOM, that's MBOM, to enjoy your first month free when subscribing to a professional monthly plan. Learn more about Coach Pals Pro membership benefits at coachpals.com/memberships. Once again, use code MBOM when you're signing up to get your first month free. All right, now back to the episode. Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like you must have had your first right around that time. And I know it's hard to do that. I'm very much in the same boat. I think just kind of pre-pandemic was when I taught last. And I used to maybe a little bit in the pandemic, but not much. And it kind of just happened from like, I felt like yoga teachers needed and studios needed my services like on the coaching business side of things more than they needed my teaching during the pandemic. And then I got pregnant, now I have a small baby. And I've had some people where I live in Mexico be like, oh, you're a yoga teacher? Like we should do a class. Let's do this. And I'm like, I would love to, but I'm also like, I feel like I'm already kind of maxed out between like working and mothering.
Right. I mean, of course you are. I am. Because I mean, I don't know about you. I'm going to record this podcast and I'm driving straight to pick up my boys. And there is no extra time for me to like sit down and make a playlist or come up with a sequence. And it may be a little bit selfish of me, but if I do have an hour, I want to be practicing right now. I don't want to be teaching. So I'm just in the season of like, we'll see. I miss it. And there's just not space for it.
Yeah. And that's okay. I think that knowing that there's chapters, and maybe somebody out there listening can resonate with this too, like knowing that there's chapters that come with, like you were talking about with your business, like going from, hey, I'm teaching part-time, I'm working full-time, to like, I'm teaching full-time, to I'm running studios full-time, to I'm running like a coaching business full-time and stepping away completely from teaching, because the reality is that there's like 24 hours in every day. We need to sleep a good chunk of those, and we need to spend time doing things outside of work too. And especially when you are like caretaker for somebody in your life, and especially kids, it's like, I don't know. I just like feel like for me, I'm in the same boat. And I'm like, if I'm going to go do something in the evenings, like, yeah, teaching yoga just feels like such an expenditure of my cup, which like already doesn't feel very full.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so interesting you say that, because I think part of my journey, I've learned that like no business, no specific offer is probably forever, because life does change and you have to commit to every business and every offer like it will be forever in order for it to be successful. So it's this beautiful like holding both. Like I love what I do right now. I can't imagine it not being the thing, but at the same time, I know life always pivots and business always pivots. And I'm seeing this right now with the potential talks of a recession. Like where we are in 2023 is very different than even where we were in 2020. And so I'm encouraging all my clients to kind of be like, okay, well, is it time to pivot? When do you pivot? How do you know when to pivot? When do you know when to change? And I wish there was a very clear like structure for that, but there's not.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what is it? What's the answer to that? Because I think that this
is secret.
Yeah. Do you have the secret sauce? You have all the answers.
No, but I think it is just being aware of like, what do I need personally first? Because if you're run dry, then you can't give anything. And then what do I see what's happening in the world? What is the world asking for? And then how can I support that with my business? Like if I were going to say anything, I would run it through those filters to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know we were talking about this before we hit record, and you were just asking how like recording seasons has been going for me. And I was like, well, it's like super new for me because I just did that pivot in my business. And I know I think that looking back on it, that pivot was probably something that I needed to do earlier, but I was like, just not sure. Like, I think it's really hard when you are feeling like the urge to shift something, but there isn't this like template of like, here's when you should do it. So I think we kind of have to just like test the waters a little bit. And then it's like, okay, water feels pretty good. I'm going to like go in more and then go all in. And for me, it eventually came like with that decision. I was like, well, here's the thing. If it doesn't work for me, I can change things back.
Yep. You can always go back to what it did work or was working.
Yeah, totally. Like MBOM started as seasons. And if you go back in my history, it's like, I think I started like season 3 or something. And then season 3 went basically until I just started this new season in 2023. So it went for like 5 years or something.
It's a long season.
Yeah, very long season. And it's okay, right? It's like we can go through these like ebbs and flows and changes. But I love what you say about like knowing that things are going to pivot. But it's like we kind of can't have that mindset because in order to be successful, we really do need to like go all in with something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a nuanced thing. And this is what I help people with is learning how to think like a CEO or think like a business owner, because I always take it to an extreme because I think it's helpful. Like the owner of Target, the CEO of Target doesn't walk in thinking we need to change our offer. We need to pivot completely. But they do walk in thinking, what do we need to do this quarter, this year to continue to support our business? And usually what you're pivoting is marketing or selling or something nuanced. What I see happen though is a lot of times yoga teachers, especially like if you start an online offering and it doesn't sell the way they thought it would right away, they're like wipe their hands of it and they pivot completely, do a 180 and do something totally new. And that's not what I'm trying to say. I think it's more like learning how to pivot strategically, really is the best word. Learning how to pivot like a business owner would, committed to the business that you're building or the business that you already have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I love that. I'm curious kind of on that note, because I do feel like one of the things I see most is like, you know, like I said before, a lot of yoga teachers don't get into yoga because they want to run a business. I think that that's not what's driving them to take a yoga teacher training program or to want to like teach yoga. And then it's like kind of this like reality that they face when they are in training or leave training, where it's like, oh, in order to do this, I am working for myself. And I feel like this comes in all capacities. Like even if you're somebody who is working for yoga studios, like you're still responsible for your own schedule, your own budget, your own finances, like filing your own taxes, you know, getting students, like getting more classes, like even from that level, like entry into the yoga industry, like you are working for yourself. So I'm curious some of the other things you see when it comes to mindset in terms of like maybe yoga teachers not like thinking like a CEO or not thinking of themselves like a business owner, essentially.
Yeah. If I could boil it down into one sentence, it's the idea that like when you think that having the capability to teach yoga is the same of having the capability to make money from teaching yoga, that's where like the breakdown happens. So as the yoga teacher, you're the talent. You are the person delivering the service. When you think about a business, that's only one aspect of the business. And so a lot of the times what I see happen is this belief that if I just get better as a teacher, if I just get more experience, if I just teach for longer, if I just do this other certification, if I just refine my talent as a teacher, then the business will just naturally happen. And this is where, I mean, I really messed up when I was just teaching. I was like, I'm going to get my 500-hour certification and then I'll make more money. And instead, I just like spent $4,000, was a better teacher probably, but it didn't change how I was marketing and selling. Mm-hmm. Because that's not what I studied. I studied how to cue better. So it's understanding that those are two very different things. And there is a time and place to improve your talent as a teacher. And it's not wrong. It's not bad to do it, but don't do it thinking like this is going to be the thing that changes everything in my business. And so I think people are much more aware of this now. Like you have to go learn how to market and you have to go learn how to sell if you don't have those skills. And that's not necessarily something that like you said, like people don't go into teacher training wanting to do that, but there is so much more available for you and for your students when you learn those skills. When you do say, okay, in order to surrender and like do my passion and do what I want to do in the world, I'm going to do what it takes. And doing what it takes includes learning how to market, learning how to sell.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that resonates for sure. And definitely, yeah, I feel like this is like such a key piece to, I think, having like a successful and sustainable yoga business. And that's like kind of the way that I teach the business of yoga is like learning business basics or like learning marketing or selling. Like, what can it do for you to help you serve more people? Because it's like you could be like the best yoga teacher on the planet, but if nobody knows you exist, like they can't benefit from your like gifts and your offerings and your services. And I feel like that's what we need to think about is like, it's kind of like a key piece of the puzzle to learn these tools and to have these tools in our toolbox so that we can be in front of people. Cause it's like, ultimately we can't serve, like we can't be of service to other people if there's nobody in the room. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's 100% true. And I think like if I were to boil it down, like the key piece that I see a lot of teachers miss when it comes to thinking like a business owner is evaluating what they're doing and evaluating it from a very objective place. I think for me, when I was teaching, my classes almost felt like art. Like they were a full expression of who I was and my soul and what I loved. And like it was almost delivering art. And when it is something that you care so deeply about and you're very passionate about, sometimes it's very hard to get that objective stance and just be like, okay, I had one person at class. Why? What did I do beforehand? What did I say? Where did I market? Like, and really evaluate it all. It's much more common to be like, no one likes me. I must be terrible. I don't know if I can do this. It's not going to work, and kind of go down the drama of it. And it's like, can we stop and pause that and just get to solving what needs to be solved in order for you to grow your classes? And that is just a skill you can learn. It is just like another way of thinking that you have to practice on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I feel like the like telling people about your classes is like such a key piece that so many people are like not thinking about or talking about. And it's like, I feel like sometimes even getting people in your classes can be as simple as like telling somebody you're teaching, right? Like inviting your friends and family or telling them to tell people or sharing a post or like sending a personalized email that's like, hey, I know you've attended a class before. Like, are you interested in attending this one? Like, here's how you register. And I think sometimes it's like we get it in our head that like marketing and sales has to be really complicated. And like, sure, there's a lot of complicated things that can exist within marketing and sales, but do we need it to be that way? No, I think it can be really simple, especially when it comes to our yoga businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think you have to master the simple first in order to then do it the complicated way. So the analogy I use for this is like, if you were learning how to drive, I hope that you'd go to a parking lot and like practice circles before you hop on the highway. And especially with online businesses now, I see new business owners think they need to set up like a whole marketing campaign and this funnel and that funnel and automated emails. And like all of that is coming. But first, we just need to master inviting someone, compelling them to show up, and then from there, selling to them. And once you have mastered the basics, doing it the complicated way, you're going to know what to do. You're going to know what to put into that automated funnel because you've already done it person to person, face to face.
Totally. Like, it's like, how do you set up like a complicated system for something that you've like never done before?
I don't know how to do. Yeah. It's hard.
Like, it doesn't like make a lot of sense. And I think this is where people get discouraged, right? It's like they splurge on the software or they set up this like whole like 7 email sequence, like going out to people. And then they're like, where are my people? Like, I've spent all this time doing this, like I'm paying for the software. Like, where are my people? And I think you're exactly right. Like inviting people, talking to them, selling to them, that's like the practice that gets like the wheels in motion for these like bigger systems that will come down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for anyone listening, because I can imagine they're listening, they're like, but how do I do that? What do I do? Right? Like, tell me. I'll just give you an example of opening the studio down here. We did something so simple. We just taught classes everywhere. I mean, anywhere, that coffee shop, like park, anywhere that would have us, we would teach a class. Then I would connect with every single person who was at that class after that class, meaning follow them on Instagram, or I'd have their email address and I would have a conversation with them. Then I was talking on my stories. This is our offer. This is what we're doing. It doesn't have to be very complicated. It's just, can you meet people and then continually connect with them at different points? Like, that's all it really is. And our brains like to be like, but I don't know how to do that. Just remind yourself that you do know how to talk to people and then follow up with those people. We do it with our friends and family all the time.
Yeah. It's like the same thing, just with business.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm curious too, for anyone who's listening, who's like, I guess just with like the kind of CEO entrepreneurial mindset, if they're kind of like maybe not making that much money, maybe they're newer into their business or just growing it. I feel like there can be like a lot of like imposter syndrome that shows up. We can often feel like, we don't know exactly like where we fit in, or like sometimes we don't feel like we know exactly what we're doing. Yet I feel like adopting the mindset, like the entrepreneurial mindset, is like super key at this point in time too. I'm curious if you have any tips for like that person who's kind of just feeling like, I don't feel like a CEO because like I'm not making that much money.
Okay. So there is no magic number where you will automatically feel like a CEO. And I know it seems like there will be, like, if you hit 6 figures, if you start to do X, Y, and Z, if you make enough to quit your job, that's a lot of people's number, then you'll feel legit, is how people say to me. And no number is going to make you feel legit. You have to decide on purpose that you are a business owner and then cultivate that belief every single day intentionally. And the way that I tell, especially brand new teachers who are just starting out, the way I talk to them about this is 2 things. One, really, really being rooted in the value of what you have to offer and the value of yoga, and understanding how big the industry is and how much demand there is for it will just help you realize that you are now just a new service provider in this already developed industry. So you can kind of rely on what's already happened to feel confident that you can also have a piece of that and have a part of that. The second thing that I tell them is that there's a difference between confidence and self-confidence. And I'd say that confidence comes after you've had experience, right? After you've started to make money or you're starting to really see students. When you don't have that yet, you have to rely on your self-confidence. You have to rely on the idea that you have the ability to learn the skills to do the thing. You have what it takes internally, even externally, you have what it takes in order to go create that confidence. And that really is the key of like, the confidence will come. Start with the self-confidence, start with the belief that there's already space for you in this industry, and then go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's really helpful. I'm curious, do you have any kind of like small daily practices or habits that like can help with this? Like, I don't know, like meditation, journaling, gratitude, like something that kind of just get our mindset around like, like I'm a boss,
Just look in the mirror and say I'm a boss every morning.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, that's a great one if that works for you, I feel like. But right? I'm curious if you have anything that you kind of work with people on.
I use a specific coaching tool that I teach people how to do this on purpose. So what we use is rewiring your brain to literally have these new neural pathways so that the thought, I'm a CEO, I'm a boss, becomes natural. And what they've found, which is so cool that they have a study for this now, is that it takes about 400 intentional repetitions of a thought for it start to create a new neural pathway. Unless you're playing, unless you're having fun with it, then it takes like 14 or 15. So it really truly is believing like, I'm a CEO, I'm an entrepreneur, and focusing on how that is already true every single day. I suggest you do it before you sit down to work. So it should already be your mindset. You should already be embodying that before you write a post, before you show up to make your playlist, before you talk to your students. And then it's really helpful if you can bookend your day with it and just look for evidence of like, how did I act like a CEO today? What did I do that shows me I am an entrepreneur? doesn't have to be mean that you made money. Most entrepreneurs, like most businesses, it takes 5 years for them to turn a profit. That's not happening these days. It can happen so much faster. So it doesn't have to be money, but it can be like, I talked to these new people. I did this new thing. I made an offer here. Those are the markers that tell you you're on your way to a successful business.
I love that. That's really great advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so one of the other things that I'm curious about, Jackie, is around the business lessons that you've learned through your career. I know that you've done like so many different things, and I'm curious if you can share with us and with listeners some of like the biggest business lessons, takeaways, that type of stuff that you've experienced and learned through everything that you've done.
Wow. That's a really big question.
I know it's a huge question. And you've shared so much good stuff already, but I'm curious if there's anything that, from our conversation that you haven't shared yet.
So something that stands out is like one of the things I am most proud of in my journey is who I've become. And this is something that I just really stand by, that like building a business is the best self-development work that you'll ever do. It can happen on your yoga mat. It can happen when you're meditating, but it can also happen when you're getting rejected because someone is saying no to your offer. So what I've learned is that when I first started out, it felt like the world's scariest roller coaster. Like the highs were super, super high, but the lows were so, so low. And there were times where I struggled of like, do I continue? Do I go back to grad school? Do I give up yoga forever? I think I really hit a low point. And then from there, it's almost like the roller coaster ride has evened out. And now the highs aren't quite as high. It's still fun and amazing, but the lows aren't quite as low because I have this innate trust and almost secure relationship with the business, with the idea of being an entrepreneur, that I don't feel shaken quite as much. And I think that's something, as you go into entrepreneurship, you have to trust, and true trust can hold some doubt and some confusion and some uncertain moments, and just know that like that's all a part of business and it gets easier as you go along. I think that's my biggest thing, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I feel like as you were talking, I was like, yeah, I definitely resonate with this. And I think sometimes it's like around expectations. Like I think sometimes we get into maybe teaching yoga or even starting your own business, and we have certain expectations about how things are going to go. And I feel like so rarely do things actually play out the way that we expect them to, if that makes sense. It's like things are so different in reality.
I just think it leaves a really interesting relationship with goal setting in business. And I teach goal setting. I do think you should have a clear revenue goal or student goal, but just remember that it is kind of an expectation pulled from thin air, and like it probably won't happen, but you can still work towards it and try and hit it and exceed it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if this belongs to a friend of mine who is in the same space as you and I. But her name's Amanda McKinney. You're probably familiar with her. She's been on my podcast a couple of times, but she kind of taught me to teach goals in the way of like good, better, best. And this is something that I've done with clients of mine that I've worked with. And I feel like anytime somebody's like, oh, I want to push myself for a goal. So it's like, I want to get, 5 more clients signing up for a membership this month, but they're like, it kind of feels like a stretch, like a little bit unattainable. And I love the idea of having like, okay, let's make that your best goal. And then what's your better goal? Like what would be something where you're like, hell yes, I crushed it this month. And then what's something where it's like, okay, I did this like maybe last month, so maybe it's just the same thing or one more student. It feels very like practical in a lot of ways. And I feel like that's something that's like really resonated with me that I learned from her. So give her credit where credit's due. It's something I've passed on to a lot of people that I love with goals.
Yeah, that's really cool. It reminds me, have you ever played skee ball where you're like shooting the ball into different holes for different points?
Yeah.
Like that's fun. And you're never mad when you make it because you just made it. It doesn't really matter which, you want to get the most points, but when it comes to goal setting, it's like set the 3 different goals. I absolutely love that too. And then just remember that like, if you hit it, meet it, exceed it, it doesn't mean anything about you as a person. or about your ability to run a successful business. It just is like you played the game and this is the amount of points you got. Do you want to play the game again? Do you want to go again?
Yeah, I really love that analogy because skee ball is so fun. And I feel like it is very much like you can think of the mindset of like timer goes, you just start like shooting the balls like as fast as you can, right? And when it gets in like any of them, you're thrilled, but you're like the most thrilled when it gets in the high one. Like you're kind of like, hell yes, I did that. But also, I feel like if all the balls just go on like the 1 point or whatever, it's also like, okay, cool, I did pretty great.
Yeah. And you also don't expect to always hit the high one. Like I think in business, sometimes we set the goals and we're like, I'm going to be perfect and hit the highest goal every time. But like, no, you're not supposed to hit that every time.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a really, really great reminder. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I feel like that's a good reminder for myself as well as everyone listening. I'm curious if you can share a little bit with us, like what you do in your business. Like tell us a little bit more about like your offerings, what you do, how you support people, if anyone's listening, like how you could support them, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I am in the middle of a pivot, like we talked about, actually.
Yeah.
I have run a group coaching program for years, and I am pivoting to a brand new offer that aligns more with my values of this information being more accessible. So that is coming in the fall of 2023. I'm not quite ready to announce the details of it yet, but essentially I help clients build their businesses, grow their businesses, scale their businesses. And I host the Yoga Boss podcast. And unlike the seasons, although I might try that now, I produce episodes weekly. So if anyone is interested in connecting, I would say either the Yoga Boss podcast or just find me on Instagram, and I'm happy to connect, and more to come with the new offer.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear that you're in the middle of a pivot, and I feel like there's like so much good stuff that comes from that, like we talked about before. So I'm excited to see where that goes. And I'm curious, can you share with people all your links? I know you mentioned your podcast, so we'll get a link for that, but your website, Instagram, all that good stuff.
Yeah. My website is jackiegmurphy.com. My middle name is Grace. A lot of times people forget the G. And then my Instagram is the same. So it's jackieg.murphy. And you can find me there. And that's probably the place where I am the most connecting with people. So I would head over to Instagram.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll make sure there's links for that as well. And yeah, I feel like this conversation's just been really great. You've covered like so much good stuff. I feel like I could just keep you here all day and just keep chatting about all things yoga business, but really grateful for everything that you've shared today. So thank you for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me and all your questions. It's always fun to talk through this with someone who cares about it too and is passionate about it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with that. So yes, thank you as well. All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Jackie Murphy. Make sure that you go check her out, give her podcast, the Yoga Boss podcast, a listen, and make sure you follow along with everything that she's up to. Check out her programs, all that good stuff. As always, a big thank you to the sponsors for this episode, Offering Tree and Coach Pals. Make sure you go check them out, give them some love, see all the goodness that they can offer you and your business. And of course, a big thank you to you for listening to the show. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing with your other yoga teacher friends, for sending me emails, DMs, all that goodness. It does not go unnoticed, and I truly couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for supporting the show, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.